Today, I have the pleasure of having Jen Peters on the podcast. She is a visionary healer, a #1 best-selling author, and founder of a global 129,000 strong healing community. Jen is best known for her revolutionary work in the field of inner child healing, particularly around dissolving emotional trauma, childhood trauma, and hidden blocks deep in the subconscious. Jen's mission is really to make healing available for all. We have such a fun conversation. I believe you're just going to love her today. Who's the person you're being? Are you satisfied? Welcome to Be the Person, a podcast for the brave and the curious, for people ready to explore their true potential. I'm your host, Annie Randall. Join me and let's get ready to go on this journey together. Welcome to Be the Person podcast. Today, I am so excited to welcome Jen Peters to the podcast. I got into her book yesterday and just loved it. She helps people with really inner work around personal trauma from their childhood. You do such amazing work, and I just see it in myself and so many people around that I know you're helping. Thank you for doing what you do.
Thank you so much. That really means so much to me. I really appreciate that a lot. And it's just, honestly, it's an honor to hold this space and do this work with the people that I work with and people in my community. So thank you for recognizing that.
Yeah. And I saw that you help so many people with that inner work around childhood trauma. And I've often heard it say, we help people, or we're most qualified to help people that we once were. And I know in your book, Coming Home, you really talk about that, about your childhood trauma. Can you just walk us through your journey of how you got to where you are today in this work?
Sure, sure. Thank you. And I do agree that often when we've walked the path, then we're in a better position, really, to help others walk their path. So my journey started off really I was adopted as a baby, as a newborn baby. So there was already deep abandonment, rejection, feeling unwanted, unlovable type wounds, unworthiness right from the beginning. And this really did set the foundations for the way the rest of my life played out. And in fact, that is largely why I wanted to include my story at the beginning of my book, Coming Home, because I wanted people to actually make the connection between these early experiences and how they do actually play out later on. But yeah, that's where things started for me. I was adopted into a family with a very angry father and a very codependent mother. So I grew up walking on eggshells and feeling very unsafe and not trusting adults or people or just even the world around me. By the time I got into my teenage years, I did experience some pretty serious trauma around gang rapes. And from there, I there was one toxic relationship after another, and my self-worth was just absolutely non-existent. And by the time I got into my early 20s, I really honestly, I was just desperate to be chosen by someone anyone would do. And that's not to try and degrade my ex-husband. Oh my God, that makes it sound really bad, doesn't it? But I just wanted to be chosen, and he chose me. And so that was very intoxicating for me. It turns out, though, that as I was extremely codependent, that really is the vibrational match for somebody who is very narcissistic. Those two tend to pair often. And so we were together for about 14 years in that narcissistic codependent dynamic. And anyone who's been there will know what that is like. It's very tumultuous. There is just a lot of gaslighting. There's a lot of emotional abuse. There's a lot of self sacrifice and betrayal. And in our case, there was also a lot of infidelity. So by the time I got out of there, I was completely broken and I felt honestly, I didn't even know what way was up or what way was down. I really didn't. I now see though that what was actually happening was that that older version of me was actually crumbling away so
Mhm.
that a newer version of me could be birthed really. And that is what was the catalyst for me starting my healing journey. And through that journey, I worked with a very, very masterful energy healer for about 5 years weekly for most of that time. So very intense work with her, and obviously very early on, I knew that I started to feel completely different and an emotional freedom I had never experienced before. And it was that emotional freedom that I just thought other people need to know that this exists because you don't know what you don't know. And that was the catalyst for me to say, I need to help other people do this. And so from there on in, my mission here was really awakened at that time, and I've been devoutly committed to this path ever since.
What a beautiful story. I just love that you have I just wanted to hug you when I was reading your
Oh,
story because it's really difficult to read as you go through all of this. Like, oh my gosh, you had a lot of trauma and a lot of things happen to you, but yet, you do hit this bottom. But like you said, it's being broken away for this new person to become who you are now and help other people. And I think probably other people just need to hear that a lot of times when you're being broken down, my gosh, it can just seem like what in the world is going on? But
mhm.
yet you can shine light that there is hope and there is just a wonderful ending.
Oh, absolutely. I That's one of my probably my key messages really is that it is actually through these very, some people might say, dark times, challenges, through these very difficult times, that is where your greatest growth is, but it's where you become. This is your becoming. This is who you came here to be. And in my case, and obviously I work with a lot. I've worked with actually probably a couple of thousand people now who've been through similar sort of situations, and it's very hard, if not impossible, to see at the time. But when you look back and you do the work, you actually see that this old version of you is literally crumbling or being stripped away because there was a new higher version of you ready to emerge. And that would not happen without you going through that very challenging time first.
So good. And you really saw this, like you mentioned in your marriage, you saw it, but you saw your childhood trauma really play out in your adult life for many years. Is that correct?
I didn't see it at the time. I was completely, absolutely unconscious to the whole lot. Hadn't even heard of a healer or this type of work until I needed it and when we separated. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I wanted to put that in my book because I wanted people to be able to see some of them are obvious trauma, other things are not so obvious, but I wanted people to see this is how it plays out later on because whatever is going on for you in adulthood, whether it's hidden blocks, whether it's toxic relationship cycles, whether it's that you just cannot get started, whatever it happens to be, it's nearly always going to come back to some kind of programming in childhood.
Yeah. I have to kind of just laugh at myself because a lot of times, I don't know, I think a lot of people are like this, but I grew up thinking, well, if you don't talk about it and if you don't maybe even acknowledge it, it'll just go away. But
Mhm.
we know these things don't go away. They just play out in some area of your life, like you're saying.
Yeah, that is so true, and I mean, yeah, when comes to programming, it definitely does not go away unless we address it. Yeah, it is interesting.
How do you most often see unresolved trauma from childhood come out in adulthood? I know there's so many different ways, but is there a top couple that you could talk about?
Yeah, I was thinking. I speak on, and there's so many more outside of this. I speak on others also, but there's 12 main themes of trauma that I have seen week in and week out across probably a couple of thousand people and also through my community. So there's quite a bit of backing to that. But probably the most common traumas that I see is abandonment. Now, I will say with abandonment, most people would assume that they would have had to have had a parent leave them in order for them to have an abandonment wound. That is absolutely not the case. Of course, if that happened, you will definitely have an abandonment wound. But abandonment, the way I see it from the work I've done, is it really is about an emotional disconnection from a parent. Now, this can occur through it often happens in the womb, believe it or not, but it also can occur through it might be mum, it might be postnatally depressed. It might be that there's already, another toddler or 2 or 3 children ahead of you that mum is far too busy chasing around after them to be fully connecting with you. So it can happen in very, very, I guess, normalized ways. So the emotional disconnection is probably the most common thing I see. So it's an abandonment wound, and that is the at the core of any attachment trauma. And attachment trauma has really become something really featured over the last few years. I've noticed, and
Mhm.
again, that occurs from the original abandonment. So those areas, so your abandonment trauma, and that looks like either feeling quite anxious and really avoiding, not being comfortable being on your own or being alone, or the idea of being single, like you really need to be around people all the time. And even when you are around people, you just want more. That'll also play out and the opposite way where we might avoid connection altogether. We might stand right back. That's those of us who are more avoidant. We might be slightly more guarded, or on the surface, we might not look avoidant, but we will only let people in so far. And those 2 pairings are very, very common, and we hear that all the time when we talk about people who are emotionally unavailable, and this is an attachment trauma that's happening and that dynamic that's happening. So, there's also the disorganized attachment trauma, which is actually a combination of both, so they can swing either way depending on the dynamic and the situation. So, those are probably the most common that I see, and obviously low self-worth and not good enough. Feeling not good enough is a really big one too.
And can you talk more about that, the not good enough? If you
Mhm,
have, because again, I think I probably see that a
mhm.
lot of people feeling not good enough. How would I don't think any parent probably intentionally puts that on their child, but how does a child pick up on that from a parent?
I'm really glad that you raised that actually, because you're right. Most parents don't set out to create this trauma in their children. There are actually a handful that do, but most don't. So, a not good enough wound. So, a few hallmark features of that is literally feeling not enough or not good enough, or that nothing you do is enough. Even if you do this, that, and the next thing, it is still not enough. Our perfectionism comes from the not enough wound, and also our comparing. You might notice that
Mhm.
when we've got a not good enough or not enough wound, we'll be constantly comparing with other people, and the thing is we will always see ourselves as less than, whether it's physical features, our personality, how much money we make, like, it doesn't matter what we put it against, we'll always see ourselves as less than. So, a couple of hallmark features of the not good enough wound, and then I will just go into actually how this comes about, because then people might recognize themselves in this. So, those were a couple of features, but a couple of other things that I see often with a not good enough wound is that we will overfunction, we will overextend ourselves, we'll be going above and beyond. So the one other way that the not good enough wound does play out occasionally is that we won't try at all. So it plays down the opposite way. So we won't try at all. people will call it being afraid of failure. And I guess in a sense that is true. But what's sitting underneath is that if we have a belief that we're not good enough, then if that is how it plays out for us, we're not going to try something new. We're not going to try something because, or put ourselves out there because there's a chance that we're not we're not going to be able to achieve that, and then it's going to prove that we're not good enough after all. So those are a few key ways that they play out. But back to your question, so this particular wound is formed often by through parenting where the parent is overly critical. They might be very judgmental themselves, which means they're judgmental of themselves actually, and that just gets projected out. An authoritarian parent, a parent who is narcissistic, you'll definitely get a not good enough wound, and a plethora of others. So those are the key areas. So it might be a parent, even if a parent is they might mean well. They might be just really wanting the best for their child. They're wanting them to do really well. They're wanting them to, put their best foot forward. So they might just not necessarily nitpick, but they might just go, "Oh, you could do this, or you could do this. Do it. Try it this way, or you could do better if you do it like this." So that constant telling them that they're not actually doing it properly the way that they want to do it.
I think that's so good and just helpful, I think, in understanding more about that work and then how, or the wound really, and then how it does show up in our lives today. And then on the flip
Mm.
side, as parents, just things to maybe look out for.
Absolutely. In fact, actually, in my book, Coming Home, I've specifically, as I was writing it, I thought, no, we need to have little notes for parents all the way through this book. So there are notes in there for what parents can actually do. And also, and they sort of, the predominant part of the book is actual healing information and actual practices so that you can actually step yourself through some healing. But I do actually speak to what some of these traumas look like in a child so that if you've got a 3 or 4-year-old running around and they're doing certain things, you can look at it and think, "Oh my gosh, that's the early stages of this." And just so that you know what you can do with it so that you can unravel it at that really early stage, which will be much easier to do than when we get a bit older.
Yeah. You guys, if you don't have this book, you need to get it. I was so into it yesterday of I read the whole thing of just really loving it. And I love the fact that you do talk to parents too, and that you really outline, those 12 behaviors that you talk about. Because even if we don't have big T trauma, maybe in our past, I think we all pick up on things, even if it wasn't meant as trauma. We probably just don't analyze things correctly when you're 5 or 6 years old or even before then, and so we all have these stories that play out in our adulthood that you were so helpful in identifying.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate that so, so much. Yeah, you do raise a really good point. Most of us don't realize, and I'm not trying to say that everybody's broken. It's not about that. We're actually here to evolve. And, as we dissolve these different patterns and traumas, we become more of who we actually came here to be. It's as simple as that. So if there's a particular area that isn't going well or you just seem to be stuck or the same kind of cycle keeps coming around again, there will be some
Yeah.
subconscious patterning underneath that's keeping you stuck in that loop. And as soon as we go in and dissolve that, that's no longer there. It is literally, you remember certain things happened, but it has no emotional charge or hold on you anymore, and so you can move forward in that particular place. So it's certainly nothing to be ashamed of or to avoid in any way. Like, I honestly don't think anybody will get out of childhood without some kind of trauma. I mean, they say 80% is formed by about 7 years old, and I would agree. I think it's probably a little bit higher than that, but it's a large proportion is formed, and that's the rules and the foundations for our entire life.
Absolutely. What would you say then if a certain like unhelpful behavior or just patterns they keep persisting even though like you're aware of them? but you keep doing something that you know isn't healthy. You're
Mm.
aware that you're doing it, but you don't change. What are your thoughts there?
So the first thing that came to mind when you said that was shame. A lot of people will probably feel a lot of shame about, I know better, I should be doing better, I don't know what is wrong with me. Firstly, shaming ourselves is not helpful. To be honest, that is most likely going to actually cause us to continue repeating the cycles. So, if we are in that situation, what is happening is that there will be a set of beliefs sitting in your subconscious mind. So, there will have been an original trauma, big T or small t. From that trauma, there will be a set of beliefs that were formed, and it might be, say, for example, we touched on attachment trauma before. So it might be that we continually put a wall up and we're very guarded, and actually we'll let people get so far, but we won't let them right in. When I say people, I mean somebody close to you, not just anybody. And so, but we keep on doing it. And so, what is actually happening there is your inner children are still hurting from the first time they experienced that original disconnection from mum or dad. And then the truth is, it was so painful for them. They have formed beliefs around connection or love is not safe or it's too painful. And so the patterns they've then formed is that they're going to do whatever they need to do to make sure that you don't ever put yourself in a situation where you're going to connect like that again, because that way they can protect you. And so that's what's happening underneath. So when we can go in and just and work with these beautiful little ones and give them what they needed at that time and didn't get, the whole lot just collapses and then you're able to move forward.
I love how you help people and do this if they need help, but in the book, you also give guidance that if, they don't have the resources to maybe work with
Mm,
you, they can do this on their own, and you
yeah.
give specific things to do to help heal that inner child.
Thank you. Thank you. It was actually really important for me to provide resources so that anybody can access healing if they choose to. So that was one of the reasons why I wrote the book in the first place. And I like to teach. So for me, I'm always wanting to provide the how to do these things. So that, as you say, anyone can pick up that book and actually begin healing at their own pace.
Yeah. Do you feel like you need an adventure or a new challenge in 2025? Join Jeff and I on our Peru trip. We're going to do a 1 day hike to Machu Picchu. It's always been on my bucket list, but it's becoming more and more restricted. So, right now, you can still walk around Machu Picchu, but I believe that won't be the case for long. We're also going to explore the Amazon jungle, the city of Lima, have the option to hike Rainbow Mountain. It's going to be a wonderful trip. It happens next September. See all the full details in the show notes. Can we take one more of the 12? Maybe we take unsafe because I
Mhm.
really like how you do this. Sometimes we would think of unsafe physically, but you talk
Mm,
about unsafe emotionally as
mm,
well. And maybe just unpack like what does that look like as a trauma? And then how would somebody heal from that?
mm. So, feeling unsafe, it's really interesting. I'm so glad that you asked that because it's not something that most people would initially realize was happening within them, that feeling unsafe. It's buried very deep. So, anxiety, you're going to probably have a level of anxiety. There's going to be I have definitely struggled with that myself, certainly with some of the experience I've had. And some of the ways it would play out for me is I would always be aware of my circumstances. Sorry, my surroundings, always aware of surroundings. You are essentially on high alert and scanning for threats. And again, this is happening subconsciously, but if you think about it, you'll be noticing different behaviors, different facial expressions, changes in tones of voices, just to see whether, you're in trouble, like whether you need to, get to safety. You Well, potentially there'll be it depends what the unsafety is actually related to. Like, if it was related to a relationship, for example, you're not gonna put yourself back into a relationship, period. You're gonna come up with a whole lot of reasons why you can't be doing that. So, unsafety, it also can manifest in the actual body as well. So, we can actually feel unsafe in our body, and that would likely to happen if you've experienced any kind of actual physical assaults. But back to the emotional, one of the ways that this quite often plays out, and this might sound counterintuitive, but basically everything is energy, including our trauma, and trauma in particular, so emotionalized energy is extremely magnetic. So somebody who might have been raised in an environment that wasn't safe, it might have been a narcissistic environment where the goalposts are always changing, there's a lot of gaslighting, or where there was physical abuse, they are likely to find themselves in another unsafe relationship or friendships later on. That'll be a common thread for them because that unsafety feels familiar. So it's a quite a complex one, but one of the things we really need to be doing there is we need to be going back. And when I talk about going back, we don't need to necessarily regress you. Like, you can be, it's a conversation like this. You're completely alert. But we need to go back to those beautiful little inner children who experienced feeling unsafe initially. And it doesn't matter if you don't remember it, the way that we do it, you'll be able to access those parts of you, regardless if you remember them or not. But we need to get them out of whatever situation they're in, bring them back to safety, give them a voice, see them, hear them, give them a voice, and find out what beliefs they've got and the patterns they're running, because that's what you're running now, and dissolve them. And what will end up happening is that your anxiety will drop, the being on high alert all the time will subside. You'll be aware of things, but you won't be vigilant with it. And you're going to feel a lot more calm within yourself as well.
So interesting because you almost think you would do the opposite, like go towards somebody
Mhm.
really safe, if you came from that unsafety. But when you said just you go to something familiar or that you know, uh, about, I guess that does make sense then.
Yeah, so what's happening there now, I will say that we can go the opposite. We usually go one polarity or the opposite. But generally speaking, we will keep on going back to that familiar. Because there's a few things that is happening there, and one of the things is those little inner children. They are desperate to repair whatever ruptures there were with the particular parent where those ruptures were. So, for example, if there was, in my case, my father was very explosive. So for me, I would have been looking, there were other reasons why I didn't feel safe in my body, of course, but just using him as an example, I would have my inner children potentially could have been looking for an environment that felt very similar to the environment or the relationship I had with my father, because those inner children would have been desperate to repair that. So if I could be better, if I could if I could get things right this time, then maybe dad won't be angry with me and maybe he will love me.
Mhm. Okay.
Mm,
Yeah, that
yeah.
makes
My son actually pointed out something a couple of years ago, which was fascinating about that. Actually, he said, "Mum, why do you need to get everything perfect?" And I'm definitely not a perfectionist, but when I'm tidying things, things need to be in a particular way. I mean, and again, I don't have things perfectly tidy at all, but there were just certain things, and he observed this in me, and I really sat with this and dove into it because I would get very anxious if he would mess things up. And I thought, this doesn't make sense. And of course, it went back to that not being safe, because when I was small, if I disturbed things of my father's, he would completely lose his rag. I mean, this guy would be literally throwing a wheelbarrow. I've seen him throw wheelbarrows, but usually tools, bricks, things like whatever's close to his hand, he'd be hurling it. So it was never safe to disturb anything, so things had to be kept perfect, and so that is another way of that how that unsafe will play out.
Yeah. Thank you for clarifying. I think that really is helpful in seeing into some of those behaviors. You
Thank you.
also talk about like three traits. They're often mistaken as personality traits, but they're really a from trauma response. Can you talk a
Mhm.
little bit about those?
Sure, sure. Thank you. So, actually, there are many different personality traits, or we would call personality traits, that actually aren't personality traits. They are actually trauma responses. But a couple of examples would be somebody who needs to be positive all the time. And there's nothing wrong with being positive, of course. But often, when they are positive and smiling and putting on a happy face, but underneath they're feeling terrible, they're not feeling good, yet they're having to say that they're feeling great and everything's great in their world. This will often be coming from a trauma where their family may have brushed everything under the carpet. They might not have ever spoken about things that went wrong, or they might have had a parent where, they had to say certain things. If you had a narcissistic parent, you would have had to put on a particular image to everybody else. And so actually saying how things really were would not have been acceptable. So that might be an example. One of the other things I see a lot of is actually proving ourselves, like doing more, as we mentioned before with the not enough wound, doing more, being more, trying to, nothing is ever quite enough. And so that it would be another example. And what would another one be? Somebody who really, now there's nothing wrong with this, and I can relate to this too, and so can many of my clients, is we might convince ourselves that we're really happy being single, and we might be, but for extended periods of time, and there might always be excuses why we don't want to get into a relationship. We're too busy, whatever the excuse might be, and that's absolutely valid for a length of time. But if this goes on for years and years and years and years, you kind of got to start looking at what's going on here. There's something else there. And chances are you've probably still got some really deep hurt about connecting with others, whether it's from an actual abandonment wound or whether it was an earlier, perhaps, breakup that really did break your heart, and you're still carrying that trauma, and it's now become part of your day-to-day personality, but it's actually stemming from trauma.
Yeah. And I can relate to that of just like really, maybe not in that case of being single, but just really letting people in because sometimes that is hard for me, even people close, and to really let them in 100% because I feel like Jeff, for example, and he would say the same thing, like we let each other in 90%, probably for the
Mm,
20 years that we were married. And it wasn't till like a crisis of like, oh my gosh, there's still this wall, this protection wall.
mm,
Not sure why, but I can relate to some of that, just keeping
yeah.
people at a distance.
Yeah, and that may also come, it can come from a number of different things, but when you were speaking, it feels like maybe, the connection or letting somebody right in isn't safe.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
definitely, probably a little bit of that for me.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, again, I can personally relate to that as well. Obviously, as you do the work over the years, the stuff starts to subside, but it's just stuff that I see, in my clients and community and stuff as well. And it's really common. And again, it's not necessarily right in front of you, so you don't see it. And I think that's one of the other reasons I like to, certainly in my posts and things on Instagram, I like to detail everything out, because we quite often don't know this is what is going on for us until we see something, detailed like that.
Yeah. So what if somebody is listening today and they're thinking, "Gosh, I've never even thought about this. They've never heard of childhood trauma
Mhm.
work." And they're thinking, "But I think this could be an issue for me." What would you recommend? Like, where do you start?
It's a really good question, and I think it's, you know what? I think it starts like that for all of us, honestly. we start looking, we start going, "Oh my gosh." But the really great thing is, though, is that we can actually dissolve or heal whatever it is that you might be carrying. So it's actually exciting to go in and do this work. So, what I would suggest, perhaps, if this is resonating with you, you may wish to pick up a copy of my book, Coming Home: The Path to Healing Your Inner Child, because that's going to give you you're probably going to recognize parts of yourself as you read this book. And the beauty about that is that you will have the tools to begin healing. Now, of course, to go deeper, you may wish to look at reaching out. I do offer one-on-one work, and that way we can move big stuff very quickly. Or I have digital courses as well. Again, I like people to be able to access the healing that they need at the level that they're actually at. But of course, there are many other incredible providers of different forms of healing as well. I will say that my inner child healing is not like a traditional inner child healing that I've seen anywhere else. Like, I do use a blend of quantum healing or multidimensional healing, which sounds very woo woo, but it's actually very, very gentle, very beautiful. And the most important thing is it works.
Yeah. I think that's what people really care about.
Exactly. I actually had a guy, quite a few years ago, and I always remember this. This guy was 6'5", big rugby player, and came to see me, and just not at all, perhaps like I would normally see, but I was really, really, really happy to work with him. But he says to me, "I don't care if you tell me to put fried eggs on my head. If it's gonna work, I'm doing it." I thought that was just classic. I loved it.
Yes. I think that all speaks to like we just want peace in our life. We want to be connected. We want to be the person that we were meant to be, like you said earlier. And whatever work we need to do, I think is just we do it to get there.
Yeah, that is so true. That is, and it's just so rewarding as every layer is brought back into alignment. We just our this gets reflected in every aspect of our life. Our life just continues to improve and improve and improve. And you may have noticed in my book, I had written a small letter to my younger self, and honestly, and it was 100% true for me. I just wish she knew what was waiting for her on the other side of what she was going through at that time, because making me say it now makes me teary. Yeah,
Mhm.
I had no idea what was actually available on the other side of doing this work.
Yeah, I love that. And I love too, you told me before we started that you were doing a special gift to our listeners, and I'll be sure I put that in the show notes for a discount for the online course. Is that right?
Absolutely, that's correct. Yes. So a special discount for you for my Heal Your Inner Child, or the Path to Healing Your Inner Child course. And that will actually guide you step by step through healing these traumas more deeply. So it'll guide you into your subconscious mind, and we'll go to exactly where these particular traumas were formed, and you'll be guided through literally dissolving them. So you can do that in your own time and space as well. And of course, I'm always here if you've got questions.
Awesome. Well, I'll make sure I link to those in the show notes. And I always like to wrap up because I am a big reader. I love to know people's favorite one or two books other than your own. What would you, and they don't even have to be related to the topic we're talking about, just overall favorites.
Oh, thank you. So I was thinking about this before, and I would say the most impactful and probably favorite book that I had read, and it was quite a few years ago now, was actually from Wayne Dyer. He was a big teacher for me when I first started on this journey, and gave me almost like a framework for me to start working towards. And it was the 10 principles of life. And I loved it, and you know what? I saw a snippet of him speaking on this on YouTube, maybe 2 years ago, and I thought, "Oh, I haven't seen that for ages," and I listened to it, and I thought, "I'm still doing these 10 things." Like, it had just completely, left my mind, but it was great to see that those principles I put in place sort of, I don't know, 13 years ago or thereabouts are now still very much in place. So I would say that's probably my most impactful and favorite book. And there was also one other that was really great for me as I was going through just starting to heal from not just from the marriage breakup, it was so much more than that. And it was Quantum Warrior from John Kehoe. And there was a particular excerpt in there that really struck me, and that was, I mean, obviously, I at that time thought that my ex-husband was the enemy, it was all his fault, and da 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 da. And yes, he'd done a whole lot of stuff. But I didn't realize until I read this particular paragraph, and it talked about the enemy actually being our partner in our dance of evolution. And without having that experience, we would not be able to evolve. So they really are a partner in our own evolution, and that really struck me, and I was able to really flip things, from that moment.
I bet that was really powerful.
It was to not see him as the enemy like that. Well, it releases us from that too, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Mm.
Oh my gosh, Jen, I learned so much from you today. Thank you for being on as a guest.
It is absolutely my pleasure, and thank you so much for inviting me. I have loved speaking with you, so thank you so much, and thank you for the wonderful work that you're doing in the world and bringing different guests with different perspectives on. It's beautiful work, so thank you.
I think we all come together and we all work and we have these different talents and gifts that we give. And it really is to be the person that we were meant to be. That's why I named the podcast The Person. So thank you for joining today.
You're so welcome.
And as always, it would mean the world to me if you would give the podcast a 5-star review. And if this resonated with you or someone that you know wants to hear or learn more about this, please share and pass this on to them. Thank you so much for joining today.